Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all. It's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, aboxwithnolid. A channel I'm creating to not only to delve into the day-to-day realities, the lived realities of trauma, but also to explore ways and the mechanisms and mechanics behind trauma to create ways to heal. Now, this is the next video in the adoption series. And I'm still, talking about the structures of the fog, which is what, is commonly referred to within adoptee communities. In this video, I want to convey as best I'm able to what I actually think the fog is. I know in several videos it can be perceived as I'm just trying to prove this stuff. And I don't want that to be the case, but I don't know how else to do it. But what I know and understand the fog to be, as I said, it's a biological threat response created from the moment of it's often created in the last trimester of pregnancy. It's in utero. It's a mammalian biological response to threat, to being born into a hostile environment. Our mother is under threat, knowing that we're either going to be taken from her or there's an extreme risk will be taken from her, or she doesn't want us and hates the pregnancy. Either way, what crosses the placenta is preparing and our developing body to be born into a hostile environment. That lays the cornerstone for, and even when you're looking at children that are removed when they're young for it and are adopted out of foster care, the environment, the mother is still under threat, and that still crosses the placenta, and the body is still battle-born. The baby is still developing and being born into a hostile environment. And that hostility is not coming from any singular avenue. It is just a hostile environment. So we are preconditioned to survive, not to explore and belong. And when we are removed, that plays out and all the threats associated. So these initial programs become embedded as that's normal. We have this mimic response to threat to try to survive. We need, we look for who may protect us because we're in such a vulnerable infant state that is ingrained in how we are as mammals, because an infant is completely helpless. And if an infant is just dropped on the ground and left, the infant will die. This mimic response, when you really look at it as uncomfortable as it is, gives a pathway to be able to understand the fundamental structures and workings of the fog. It is not purely the autonomic aspects, even though they're a large part of it. But if you want to look at this in a way to understand it, which is the way I looked at it, was there are books out there, and there is plenty of video evidence and all that, where they're showing how they're trying to rehabilitate children that have been highly abused, but were placed in pens of animals to survive. I'm not going to name them. I'm not going to go into that kind of detail. But they're out there, and there's quite a few. And I'll forewarn you, they're not. If you've gone through traumatic, particularly childhood, it is a very uncomfortable read. But it shows the world the fog in its entirety, in its brutal entirety, in a way that cannot be ignored or written off or dismissed, because that's the fog. you can see them that they emulate the behavior of animals because they see themselves as part of that pack, of that group. The one I'm particularly thinking of is a young girl who was raised in a pen of dogs. And her vocalizations, her communications were the language of those dogs. And those dogs understood exactly what she was saying, and she understood exactly what the dogs were saying. She didn't walk on upright. She walked on all fours. She ate. Her stomach and digestive system coped with the bacterial count in food that no normal human being would be able to. Her behavior and everything was that of the pack of dogs she was raised with for years. And the rehabilitation from that took many, 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 many years. And facets are still present. But that mimic response to survive, she had to be accepted into that group of dogs and not be a food source. That mimic response of that need to belong and be part of played that part of being a submissive member of that pack. And the body adapted and evolved developmentally to be able to survive on the state, the bacterial count, and the decay of the food and water available. To grow from being a very young child into an almost adolescent. She was in there for many, many years. When you understand that that's what the body does under extreme threat, you can see how much the survival mechanisms that infants rely upon when under threat become embedded in how developmental they are. And when you have this understanding and you look at how the lives of many adoptees play out, there are distinct correlations between how this mimic response to survive becomes the basis of the personality that we are. She believed she was a dog, which she had to convince herself she was to be part of, even though her eyes would tell her that she looked completely different. She still believed she was a dog. She told herself every moment of every day to fit in, to belong. We tell ourselves every day that we're part of a family that we biologically don't look like, that our mannerisms and everything else are different. We emulate to fit in, to survive. We create this entire structure that embodies every facet of our neurophysiology and our physical makeup, our psychological and emotional makeup. That's the fog. That's the reality of it. And as I've said, the levels of success come down to if you can maintain the environment that supports it, it doesn't fall. If it gets challenged or under threat, it can do. If, in what happens with a lot of adoptees, circumstances change and it collapses due to those circumstances when you're older. As I said in the previous video, mine completely collapsed because of an illness and because of the environment I was in. It is something that needs to be really understood. But, as I've said in other videos, the research into this is nobody wants to do it because it threatens an accepted norm that adoption fixes. But I've seen the aftermath of the fog, and as I've said in previous videos, what the outcomes are. Where to take this and where I want this channel to go is I'm trying to convey the understandings needed to develop the ground, to get the support, to create the therapies, to get the help that we need. Because generationally this plays out. But I also want the understanding out there so that we can be given the grace when our fog doesn't fulfill the needs of what others ask of us in our relationships and friendships. I've been dehumanized, dismissed so often in my life that I stick a lot to myself, because what I know and what I refuse to accept now because of what I know. I can no longer live a lie. But I've seen the threat of when you know the truth around adoption and what it does and what's involved in it. How much of a threat you are to society, to government, and to other adoptees. But I will still tell this story to those that I hope will listen. And understand how physiological, how body this process is, this mechanic is. And for all of you practitioners out there, when you start to work with adoptees, understand that you're not trying to get a mind change. You're trying to get a body to be rebuilt and relearned. So as always, I love your guys' comment and feedback. Please be mindful. Please be respectful. And I'll see you next time. I hope.